So if you engage my service and has to do with interest in land or anything that affects land, our scale of fees, a scale of fees is between 10% to 20% of the value of the land. If we say land in law, the construction of the law, the word land in law, the construction is to the extent that your land is that BBOC assassin don't know forms or feature as land. It's lawyer BBO to Macado, measure 10% of the value of the land. Obisubakado measure 15, Obisubakado measure 20 on your overcharge. It is not a subject of what's it called misconduct. Because so charge you some no bro. Able to miss an acronym paying for him, General Legal Counsel.
Ebusiafo in the minimum be my lawyer Alex Mensa, eba be bought nkombo e wa asase ho. Se wo to asase se wa to asase na asem bia ba ho. Eni ti pembre na tie yen. Na bombo dia na share video no ma yen. Fa wo comment niam bia wo gidi se wa to asase na pesa wo to asase. Wo questions bi ono. Fegu comment section no. Se ye hu comment section ni bebre da. E betwi ye nua be ma aba. Ni asanso ni na be bedi nkomo. Obe me na ti sen.
Nyame admende now. What point is saying anyway tearful.
Me when ye tearful so ye
is that me tree no on your papa. So me tree no on your papa. So there will be fancy kakra wom, tree kakra then we all proceed.
Me das me aso me bro for your papa nti ye betimi aye ye betimi akasa. Emfe be ya hini na wa ye lawyer dwuma no.
Yes, so since 2019 and I started my law practice.
Okay, so uko school wa he ni ade said ye be ya obi abehu be bia wo wie school ni ade.
So basically to become a lawyer in Ghana, you have to first of all have a first degree in law. And then after having the first degree in law, as I said, we call Makola, as we say in Ghana School of Law. Then when you pass or pass your exams now, then you start practicing as a lawyer. And see, me law no Ghana ha. Of course, ebimu to me by US, Commonwealth countries to say UK and all that. For instance, Oko UK a study law, and you are called to any of the ins in courts or US UK. If you are called to any of the ins in UK, Oba Ghana ha, you will be a friend post call. Post call and say you call you as a lawyer, a jurisdiction or a Commonwealth jurisdiction outside Ghana. So we can't Commonwealth jurisdiction countries are. They are under the UK, United Kingdom, territory or administration in the past. And then for so if you call UK, and then for equestrian law or to be called to the bar, or Ghana have because the certificate, and certificate issued in Ghana to practice as a lawyer in Ghana, and as you saw, post call or joining Ghana School of Law or short course. Or pass another friend to the Ghana bar, or they call that candidate to the Ghana bar. Yes. So, in short, that's how one becomes a lawyer in Ghana, basically. So, for instance, if you ask me, before I became a lawyer, I was an accountant. I had my master's in finance and all that.
Okay. And we see our office where you fa.
So currently my office was East Legon. Yes, East Legon to be precise.
It's Legon. Okay. And now feminist so one case I would tell who I will be your office. Who should be I say and I said one I would do.
Yes, so I'm a partner to the law firm called LTF. LTF. L stand for law, T stand for tax, and F stand for finance, or sometimes we call it accounting and finance. What it means is that a very professional, maybe one, or some of the partners, one. So lawyers, tax, accountants, and a financial analyst, and a sa we no abom aye abbreviation a friend LTF, Law Tax and Finance. So your law firm is in the law LTF to be precise.
Okay. And it maybe say
managing partner. Law firm.
Okay. Oh, so more firm no a deep how many years? Mo tell mo one now ko journey one no. Ye person ye hu say so be a bisa question no be wa obi o ka say wa man why lawyer fufro nim ti me person ye nya background ye answer na ya start ye bisa.
So we said it is relatively young law firm. I mean, we used to be with a different law firm, but looking at the future, what we intend doing. If I say what we intend doing now, every day member boy and I say tax, accounting, finance, na no honka. Yeah, about one umbrella. So we don't only do law, we practice or we render service in other varied areas. So yeah, but for me, this particular law firm is I would say it's relatively young for the sake of this interview. Yes.
Okay. All right. So me person me bisa say obi pass asase wo Ghana. Edi ade pa necessary ohwehwe first. Say bia metie sisia na me say me person me to asase a edi ade pa necessary me hwehwe wo book mu. Say me hia obi na nipa kono se me wo asase a me ton. Say me pene so na ye di ano na say ye ya. What is the first thing I have to me bisa no and necessary me hwehwe?
So, Andy, let me take you back.
Okay.
Yeah, we are here in Ghana. What type of land, as I say, ena ye can wasem. You will be able to say customary land. You call customary land, sir. We're talking about ebusuya asase, family, ebusuya as in family lands.
Okay.
You can two lands, akondwa ho asase or skin or clan. These are what we call customary lands. Then we have what we call public lands or private lands. You call public lands. You see, as I see where you are buying there. So when we say customary lands, most of the time, the custodian of the land, for instance, you call ebusuya asase, it is the head of the family. You. He is the trustee of the family land, or the head of the family is the one who manages the lands that belongs to the family. My the same way, if you cast two lands, we are talking about the chief.
Konja ho asase.
Konja nimpoye awahino enena ohwe akondwa ho asase. So for instance, so person will turn any of the customary lands, for instance, it's family land. You need the head of the family with the consent and concurrence of the principal members of the family. Say kasa potokas in Jamaica, so person also ebusuya asase a. As I say winya ebusuya penny no na ebusuya no de omodi mu ewe ebusuya no mu no so omo sign omosa erero krata or contract HSA the assassin NDA. Say a back two lands as I say or here no and no ordinance together with principal elders. So almost what you have to say assassin way from NDA. So back to your question. And then of course we have what I said, the public lands. So the government holds it in trust for the public. It's vested in the government. Yeka government. Public lands are vested in the government, and he holds it in trust for the public use or public goods. So of course, it is the land that the land registry and all that would have to be concerned with the conduct or the sale of that land. Then, of course, we have individual lands. There will be a non-custodian in land, either by gift or marriage or any other incident that connotes ownership. Well, question, how we come to your question? Say, trust us. Bear in mind, you have to be a prudent purchaser. You're a prudent purchaser. Say, we could say, straight roho baby. Now, we need the assassin. Or as assassin yeah advertising. The first thing you have to do is to make sure that you engage lawyers. Have very unfortunate Ghana Hano. We engage lawyers after the facts, expose fact to it. As soon as you know, now if you're moving, Kwamina Mensa, the Obi Afamasasi, and you know, or the Abaka or the Aba NDA the program. Say, Unya lawyer, ma'am. But in the US or in an advanced country, you know, whenever you are going to conduct any sale or purchase or BB, which is contractual in nature, say more engage lawyers, professionals who have the know-how to conduct that exercise. You come unfortunate, but we'll get there with time. So when you, for instance, when you engage a lawyer, there's a lawyer in here and he said, you need to identify the land. Because why am I saying so? Your brother or lawyer say no two lands are the same. So first of all, you have to identify the land. When you identify the land, you conduct a search. The search manifest or the search history. Ebe chere say asase ya de swedro ya ye ka ho asem. Or asase ya de is egonya ye ka ho asem. Say na asase no enkrofo a mu hold the interest room. Say no mwenya na ebedu mpempensu we ya. Ebedu mpempensu we ya chere say NDA and the last person on record. Having that is not enough. It is not to show, say, in a media. You know, we have a system where people with financial muscle say the same was it's, you know, he would upset the conduct registration in the Munka or bedding car register. Just to be about when we say, oh, a media. But the truth of the matter is that if we want to establish ownership of a land, properly so called, say litigation, but as a mentoring, now we want to establish ownership. The search alone is not enough. It is only court of law, and a bit to me determine say a NDA and I say a criminal mensa there. So you conduct a search. Searching on the face of it, you know, it gives you an idea, the history, the manifest on who had owned. Now, who's the NDA maker? Some say you have to be a prudent purchaser. The search is not enough. Assassina ukohuno either assassina ukohuno either Swedro or East Legono. Most of the time, Assassibia may have boundary owners. You will be on any bushy. So you do what we call due diligence also by who was there, right? Assuming when assassin moton, you've engaged the one purported owner of the land, one papers, let's say in the site plan. In site plan, what they are called conducted search, right? What they are conducted search, you know, anyone who says NDA is the last person that has ownership or that has record on the land. Well, maybe I'll conduct a search, you know. If it is a registrable area, because if it's not registrable area, you won't see all this. Okay. Actually, say NDA is the last person on record. We'll be to me to an amount surveyor to pick the coordinates or assassin. And so once we surveyor pick coordinates now, or they be conduct searching or the report now, but say the result shows say NDA will be to me aqua assassin. So ask the investigation by asking neighbors adjoining and say assassin way a wind there. We say a pair ake we see ubenya a fair idea that will solidify what is on record. It may be that in truth NDA and it didn't was so, but he is the beneficial owner. Just say and you know it will be for fraud there. So once you conduct a search by your independent surveyor, while conducting due diligence, see, every interest in land, there was several interest in land. You sure say what BB, you say intention, let me touch on that. Site plan is different from the legal documents that binds party. No, the me person me tell say in krata some and say contract or ownership or conveyance or transfer. No, in most cases you find it on what we call you find it on what loosely we call indenture. Indenture and actual contract between the or transfer ownership to the person receiving either by way of sales, gift, or any of the incidents that conveys ownership. Now, we share indenture at this point. Our indenture is our legal document. Indenture will describe the type of interest you have on the land, or the owner, or the purported owner. I mean, you see, I'm choosing the words carefully because all the words are not exhaustive. Because if I say owner, a court may say otherwise. So on record, on the face of it, the purported interest holder. Into who be saying then you actually lease. There are several interests in land. Say if you say owners, you can say omuna. Eka alodia owners are their omodia assassin bobadi. Ebi a sweet assassin fantiphobia omoko hunting and settle. Then we have what we call usufruct. Usufruct in chess and fantiphony didn't come back settle ebiana other settlers to be on mobile bibi kakramom. These are the superior interest in land was and then we have lesser interest in land, what we call the leasehold. So yes, you a leasehold 50 years, 80 years, 90 years. That is one interest in land. Now we have what we call assignments in land. Leasehold would specify a particular term. Into assassin, for instance, ND. Ebi I say assassin a wokotoe no. Ebi a family land. Right? Say a family land is a contract, as I say, obo ebusia ebi a anana ebusia penyi kojoata. Ne house no more or so and so. Ojinama anana ebusia no. While convey that particular interest depending on the parcel or the portion I would pay, maybe 1 acre, another 1 plot to NDA. To NDA. So you will see the word lessor and lessee. It shows the nomenclature parties on position. That is one. And I just said, oh yes, now. When you're a dinner, your last person was you have to establish say nimpa krono or convey assassin or to me. Capacity is very important when it comes to conveyance. Or to me say or the assassin by NDA. Mind you, a family land is not a self-acquired property. And yet nimpa krona ni property and now the amount. Into year Kassan say when it comes to family land, it is the head of the family with the consent of the principal members. But ne banu zifono or they design and or share the ways answer we convey or transfer my NDA. That pushes us to one leg of making sure say as I said to you, reduce or eliminate the potential litigation. Having done that NDA, that is the agreement now. When I've told you, maybe subsequently we'll go into other interests because there were assignments, no so or multi, there was sublease or multi, but NDA as a prospective land purchases or buys one share, what we call duration beyond the parties, their capacity there. Or a business to muton. What is the term? Or I think I was amo. Obi Omana, you know, this is 99 years. On Yanokara. Or a case by case basis. Enkran, baby cry, it's least what it is as short as 20.
Wow.
Yeah, depending on each set of facts. For instance, foreigner and to me, they own property or interest in land for over 50 years. In
so
law, exactly. We are Hokwa. In law,
so be American or Bagana or American or Bagana Betasia. On to be in for 90 years.
No. Yan Kroma Brandon said that cannot be the case. If the person is an American citizen, is a foreigner. In law, no, you see, you can't personal, a company to me a person, what we call artificial person, and then the natural person to say me anyway. And you know, if you're a foreigner, regardless of whether you come from Afghanistan, US, UK, Germany, wherever, and yet Ghana, you cannot have interest that exceeds that. So you need to find out term or duration or so maybe NDA was as in your question, maybe a lease and yet sublease, or maybe a assignment and yet lease. Now, when who duration will be said be a friend of renewal clause. It is very important. These are in law we say the devil is always in the details. We don't look at it from the legal document and then channel. So 70 years and now 80 years now a dema and what happens if it expires after the expiration of the 70 years or the 90 years? Assassin, okay, Assassin, the question to ask is that okay, you have to make sure there is what we call renewal clause. In that renewal clause, it specifies in the event that it expires, you can renegotiate on another term. It is also very important. Then in the same document, as our assassin able to NDA. This is also very important. Is it for residential purpose or is for commercial purpose? We don't look at those things. Assassin was it for residential or for commercial? That's also cause for another thing. Sometimes even it is not about say double allocation, but every project we neighbor adjoining land on your because maybe the purpose of the land is not for the purpose.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You see, conducting church service, was it that you signed in for in the indenture? Yeah. They can maintain an action against you in respect of that.
Because me you die tama yen dining nest sorry na de pa so
yes. So sorry sir me no. When you look at the purpose for which we there now, assuming say for residential, presumably you want to assume say your adjoining land should also be residential. So a cabana say what die now watch reno debiana yes moja sorry, it's called nuisance or to waswa. You can maintain an action against the tortfeasor. A torturous like a tortfeasor, the order step one for noise. It's more of a noise pollution. You can maintain an action against that person. That is another day for discussion. But just as we want to educate our listeners or our viewers as to their order as a prudent purchaser, a quarter assassin or Ghana. What are the basic things? These are the basic things. It's not exhaustive, but at least it gives you a fair idea there. In truth, say Okaban de assassin po asama bahwa. The law would look at it from what we call, were you a prudent purchaser? The law would look at it from the point of view, say, were you a prudent purchaser? And did you acquire the property assuming say asama bahumpona you do not have what we call the legal document properly so called? Are you an adverse possessor? We'll go into all these things with time if we have it. So prudent purchaser in there, you conducted the search by your surveyor. The search results shows say are not being seen and isn't what the last person. You know the history on the manifest. Then you go ahead and you negotiate for a price. In that negotiation as to price or what we call consideration, you should be giving or the person that is conveying or the interest in Maono should have a legal document properly so called. On there at all material times, that what we're BB. Of course, any interest in land that spans over 3 years must be reduced into writing. Any interest in land that spans over 3 years. That's the position of the law. However, there are exceptions. In Bibia, your law, customary law knows no writing. Your Bibia lawyers, customary law knows no writing. Or the ND, I mean, now, Yanana, or they cross one brand when you match or throw. So it doesn't mean that say one show Bibia or the Masasi was my NDA because it has not been reduced into writing into it is faulty.
Okay.
We have to go into the merit to make that determination because by conduct, somebody would come and testify to that extent say yes, we're on the purple my NDA. Now, what's of any capiki we no conduct and then I said you can also be asking neighbors. In your assassin sites, no two lands are the same. So in your site, watch because sometimes and you have to let our listeners also pay attention to this. We know we talked about the interest leasehold, we talked about the term or the years you have been allocated. You also have to look at whether it's for residential or for commercial use. Then I also said renewal clause. Very important. Now, having done that, you have to also make sure, yes, having paid for all these things now, where execute for want of this for by this agreement indenture legal document not there was a doc we convey interest was one. What you have to also make sure is that once you know the interest therein, assessing, because you see site plan on your drawing, or the topography size, sometimes you have to be thorough to know there, or a surveyor, a lawyer ought to be thorough to know that the size that has been described, our site plan, or a legal document, because sometimes there are mistakes. Everyone actually do 100 by 100 our site plan, but intention legal document also 80 by 20 is being reduced. It is very important. These are the devil that is in the legal document that we have to pay attention to. Then your convention was there, and you have to test the land. That means you have to test the land. You have to test the land to establish whether there are no adverse processes, or there are no superior or adverse interest or trading. As I see you or ever corner the water the vacant land when you be out. Now also I got to as I see baby holding. Now when you be out, does not send a signal that this is potentially litigation or encumbered land. Until you test the land by ABA as Amia be a kugudu, ABA erect wall to your size as a gate out to run. A bin where the man was why one room now was the OB. So you see, when you engage in that conduct, Sabiwa, so you'll be the Obupi. It would exactly it will expose any encumbrance. Ntawantawa Humbiano obey when you test the land. Then by doing so, maybe because what's it called? My other profession as a tax accountant or tax consultant, be someone there, America. What say your income? America say any income, and a juma. A juma na as if a bear or the income biano, a income tax, and
tax one, yes.
Ask yourself, do we do that thing? It's so funny. Every time I was working that, and me sure there was as here quarter. Yeah, read the entry man. He didn't ask for a tax clearance.
I don't know.
People sell land huge sums of money. They don't issue us with any tax clearance therein. We don't. It's very important because as a citizen, as a civilized citizen, that is form part of mobilization of revenue for government. And By extension, it depends on the arrangement. If you are more bakado, assassin, more inclusive of the tax element, or exclusive or to tax element in if you properly so called and said on your income on and call Okotia Mobana. It's as Pananka Edisicama no or no tax. What in as tax consultant we call it realization. We as tax consultant we call it realization. So you have sold a parcel of land. So you've realized or you've made an income and you have to commit that to the government. We don't do it. So you go and make sure you pay your tax to the internal revenue, and then you do what we call documentation. So now let me bring you to the documentation part.
Yes, ebusiafo wo hwɛ me ana wahyɛ me video no ama me. Yedi nkombo ye ne lawyer Mensa edi nkombo eba asase ho sɛ wo pɛ sɛ wo ta asase sɛ wo pɛ sɛ ubisa sɛ dia wo ta asase asɛm bia meba ho no. Wakyerɛ yɛn kakra sɛ anka first thing is hu asase na wo pa ɛwɔ sɛ anka wo de ma lawyer. Na anka lawyer no otumi eden ehwehwɛ sa nneɛma na wabobɔ so ne nyinaa de ama wo. Ansana wetu anamo ho any nti no yegusu ayedi nkomo bo modi na share me video no mame na follow me all the social media platform di Nana Donkwata or TikTok Nana Donkwata, Instagram Nana Donkwata, Facebook Nana Donkwata, and YouTube Nana Donkwata. Lawyer me ne line na misa atiko akampacha so wo hwam ya share video no mame ne lawyer Mensa and na edi nkomo e wo asase ho ene nsemsem sa wo kota asase e de ade necessary wo ye sema ese ubisa ansa na wetu anaman dia waka kakra me yehu ni se ansa na obeta asa wu asase na opekura wu na wani jinwa fema lawyer na lawyer nye niama bebreda ma na wabobo so no ene yade we ye niama ehia pa because me tie mata asase almost 24 years ni I think say 23 years ni asase pe person na ye ready be mende wan wakura but ye si dine rio enti say asase na go through and just say Missy am because she ni aya adjenja sunny good you contain your gary your I was a cocoa your Tom Brown bombodiana Africa market bia bisa say sunny good upebi bombodiana na download the tap send for me promo code ND1 for shame na first send this kakuma busuafo a omo wiase afadena lawyer Mensa be patro yetie o.
Yes, so we're going to say back registration,
Yes.
Also massa aqua register massa registration go to yellow paper and all that. In Ghana we have two types of registration and it's governed by the Registration Acts, or started actually from the ordinance, the 18th century, down to what we have as the registration PNDC law 152 and all that. Registration in Ghana, assassin, there are two types of registration. So land title registration and deed registration. Now, when you say deed registration, what was happening with the deed registration was that I describe what land after the so-called either lease or sublease, depending on the particular interest you have in the land. As indenture, then you go to the land departments. Nanka wa register based on the description. That is the deed registration. The deed registration was done more or less to show the superior interest or the prior interest in land. More in there. One and all the papers also called to Lands Commission for one year in town. It does not connote ownership. Owner in there, assassin by your wizard. It's all evidence of the priority of interest. You can't priority of interest. And one between Nana and a Kwame. One and all the papers also cut down as well first. So in essence, that's what the deed registration was seek to achieve. That's what the desired result, to convey or to signify who has priority of interest. Now, registration properly so-called, registration of land does not convert ownership or does not signify ownership. It only shows interest in land, because the law is that any instrument that affects land, it has to be registered.
Okay.
So in doing so, then the problems that the deed registration came about, of course, Ghana Hanya Bibia no registration district. So we are registration district. We're talking about Accra and Kumasi and some part of the Western region and all that. However, the mischief that the land title registration seek to cure in respect of the deed, it was a deed, there was the assassin papers, NDA or ne assassin or a leasehold. And BBA Busuafuni assign BBA Pepe and Obum Nkawaza Kodo as we NDA no can ordinary document over two. We want, it's part of the land administration to have records. All this registration whatsoever, however way it is described, it was done to avoid double registration or multiple Cs or people who are treated by fraud. That was what is supposed to cure, because like I said, no two lands are the same. It's in Kaawo, was it this portion of land was one. Once there is registry to that effect, or if it is computerized, when you key in, it will show though. But it belongs to ND, so you cannot sell to Kwamina, right? Now, so the land title registration that seeks to cure that mischief. So with the land title registration, it went a step further as to cure the mischief. Ma deed registration why? So deed registration, ma surveyor no describe on an washe ebi krana wadro dro bibi. The title one, they will have to use what we call cadastral. Pick coordinates, point to point, pick point to point, point A to D to E. Oh no, or ma answer my using kaya no two lands are the same. So that you register one to one farmer. Thank you. So these are the two registration regime we have in Ghana: deed registration or land title registration, properly so called. Now, in doing so, registration, like I said, is to signify, it is notice to the whole world. Registration does not connote ownership. Okay. Registration itself, registration simplicity, it doesn't connote ownership. It is notice to the whole world. How do I mean by notice to the whole world? On America, if you took title visa, I was in Kansas, I went to work and reasonably Wabakado, NDA, or BB paper, document to be or interest. If it is titled to that extent, you realize that because the topography, cadastral plan, and all that has picked the coordinates, and so it will also establish there is a title to that effect. But mind you, there are exceptional circumstances. You can have all these things, but maybe, I'm choosing my words carefully, it was procured through fraud. So you going there to engage in registration and all that may not necessarily
mean say what dear and
so well, anytime there is land dispute, if you register, it's registration and stamping. There's something called stamping. So when you register, you stamp. The stamping itself, you pay stamp duty to the state. The stamping of the document, it makes it admissible in court. So the law is that if it is not stamped, it is inadmissible. So as a word will lease agreements and I will paper as record court. Now stamp
Mboma.
Court, one fine you. It is inadmissible. The court on June 2. The what stamp swap, and listen carefully. What stamp swap, court in due to it depends on the weight that the court will put on that particular document that has either has a deed or title on it. Because in law, what we say is that fraud vitiates everything. Adibia okay, yeah, fraud. That's what we say, fraud vitiates everything. So, in effect, these are the things you have to do to then have some degree of certainty there. Okay, having gone through matter assassin, mass surveyor or PK, independent surveyor or PK, or a conduct search, and when you pacona needs in word no, and when you pacona needs in word no, and you can negotiate the price. Then you know what kind of price they're in, whether it is leasehold, sublease, assignment, whatsoever. Nyimpa so or convey interest, he has capacity. Nyimpa or convey interest, he has capacity to do so. If it's a family land, the head of the family with the consent and concurrence of the principal members. If it's the stew or skin, is the chief together with principal elders or with the consent of the principal elders that can prop or in effect alienate land or sell land to any prospective buyer. In absence of that, so on here now or feed there, Sabiwa, on your hand no cotton, assassin NDA, it has no legal effect. Because in Brandis in Nankasano, he's just a trustee of the family property. He's just an administrator.
Oh, sure, so, but then you
Exactly. So his authority and faculty is limited to the management of the family property, but not a self-acquired property. When you're Nankasano is out to when you see my husband, girlfriend, or neighbor, or anybody matter. You know, we have to be very certain. There should be that degree of certainty as to the person who conveyed the interest, whether the person has capacity. Simple okay at the Chelsea or gifter. Yeah, Kusuma Mambrano, there is a way. Every custom has a way of what constitutes a custom to gifts a parcel of land. We need to establish there. Did they follow the customary protocols? Wogunsa, Ebusian Bay, or assassin Ebusiana, head of the farm, so Ebusians in this context. Obia by Wogunsa, so token or they trade, or and all that.
Depending, I dance for what say or more the chair.
Exactly, depending on what constitute the customary protocols, particular custom. Ebi Asebi, one of the way they conduct theirs may be different from Yana Mfansi enclave. So it's case by case basis. It's very important to establish that. And see, these are the basic ones. It is not exhaustive because issues of land administration and unfortunately, because of our land administration has not been properly set up, it's worrying. One would have thought that the issue about title registration or the PNDC law 152 now regulates registration of land properly, so called. It will bring some sanity. But you must always think about what the bad man will do. Just as I said, if you are Oscar, until he can flex his muscles and go and pay and have all these legal documents, but on a year beneficial owner. He may on paper legally, he may be the legal owner, however, he may not be the beneficial owner. There are two things here. So we have to know what are the nuances that goes into it. Once you are able to do that fairly, you can reasonably say there, oh, this land reasonably able to master. That is the picture. You first of all have to know your interest.
The way I okay did not just say it's a lot.
It's a lot to the layman. It's a lot to the layman. It may not be a lot to a lawyer who is thorough and diligent. Okay. On the basis that going to conduct a search with the surveyor should be within some reasonable time. Tebiwa ND ehu asase Ewo East Legon, vacant land for that matter. Assuming there is vacant land, and it has been advertised. So, first point of all is to contact the purported person who claims to be the owner. And these are the work that you will engage a lawyer to do that. So the lawyer knows what to look out for. It's just not kind of mampona motonama despite mampona motonama NDA. Mampo, you mentioned, you say we call it influence peddling. So these are mere puff or turn into your own there over carcass or someone. But the devil is always in the details. Once you contact the person, watch assassin, you get an independent surveyor, properly a surveyor that you would engage. The surveyor goes and pick the coordinates. Your lawyer would write to if it's a registrable area, the Lands Commission to get the manifest history of the land. First point of call. Once your surveyor gets that, before we can negotiate as to price. In negotiation of as to price, it's about, is it $100,000, or I would offer you, you have a counter offer of, let's say, $50,000. What else do you have to do? What you have to do is the legal documents. All this in the lawyer would have to do. So, you see, there is this funny thing that people who are not able don't look out for. Sabiwa, ND, I just drew attention to the duration. You can go and buy $100,000 parcel of land easily one. You don't know the difference in the interest in land. Just as I mentioned, some of the lesser interests or some of the interests like with leasehold, sub-lease, and an assignment. Obia one illegal effects. Obia one illegal effect. So, for instance, NDA, if you have a lease agreement, na epede epanuhubi mama. But a leasehold of less than 70 years, na epede epanuhubi mama. That conveyance are epede epanuhubi mama. We have varied one. We have what we call sub-lease. Sub-lease. Or the the leaseholder no. Epede epan maybe kakra. So the reversionary interest, 20 years no so order send back, it will revert back to you. That is different from what we call another interest called assignment. Assignment no so or your interest in land properly so called. But no, what duration now working in so kabande ND was no epede convey or etana. Yes, I working in our baby more. You've assigned your own
to you,
to me. So we have to know. So you may run everybody. I mean loosely. Okay, tendency. Okay, that's good. Evershana ebia. Some 10 years be pay. Now, wako duration of 10 years. There is no renewal clause. Into AC skyscraper, 10 apartment, 40 floors. Question is, what would you do after 10 years?
After 10 years.
What would you do for me? Properly so called. You see, and the law does not encourage unconscionable gains. But you see, you should also be a bit diligent, a prudent purchaser for that purpose. And then you are going to purchase a property worth about $1 million. How much would a lawyer charge you?
Because the whole thing is reason why I ain't getting to lawyer and they said the price is too much. So okay. Because they are okay, a lot of work. But I to say Chrome Hanum say no. Who say no can be say who bet your tax. Say ye juma a humanity tax no. At the same time no say who kota dia. Ube we na woma tax me ti buy na kasa yade no. Ti buy tax no crans and na woma catch say total ni $20. So let's say the one dinner kota na $16. Ube ti our taxes bet say $3. Until and you will not be decided to meet you and I mean you. But where you are, the be a we are as an ogotia. And I, hanum say, oh, to dine swap. you cannot buy a house or a land without a lawyer. Everything come together. But Ghana no, funny so be accident and any idea victim no have to go and look for a lawyer. I'm not even can. The line
Nana.
And it's no and a problem. But say idea you who say a come back because lawyers momo fee no and no name say be push nipa bebre away. And into no idea say you my lawyer no. Yentime fa my lawyer near the akwakomo before network not to go. Ye di lawyer nkrata asem asase ho nkrata asem nkombo, and I am so happy because there's so many things that go through Ghana obeto dan no unya wasase obeto dan na kosi bebe etobo krampa no we start e dan no ansa na we hu se asase ne kwa nya wo de na wo se wo mu bugu ni ade nti we ye nkombo a camera natiko we ye nkombo a ehu hia pa na I think say the way I so you know we will do part 2 so there be a bit in nkomo we ye but me dia me bisa na ye musika na mo je no.
So thank you for the question. I can assure you that if you look at the potential litigation that revolves around land, paying a lawyer to do diligent work for you as a client, I can assure you it saves you from one too many headache. It saves you from potential encumbrance on the land. For instance, if you had in the test case scenario as a land issue, entity as a lawyer, as if you would engage a lawyer, a client would engage a lawyer. For instance, in the context of land, we have what we call scale of fees. Scale of fees, but able to argue. So with issues about land, the scale of fees is between 10% to 20%.
Okay, so 10% of this is what we should do with the property,
of the land. So it is good you said the property. I mean, I think when you use the word property, it connotes a proper description, because you see in law when we say land, we're talking about the land itself and whatever is on the land. So the drafters of that scale of fees, properly so called, also there between 10% to 20% of the value of the land. In land, the value, the land means the land simplicity plus the value.
So what say ebi I say since I say me about the phone na say e dan ya matter to say yen dan ya matter say na say ye wo problem wo ho a o charges near 10% with assassin any dan na sisu ni ni a.
That's what we call land in essence, yes, to some extent.
Okay, so but me foul assassin pe ho and assassin pe na 10% no and na dia me sisu ni ni come involved.
So if you engage my service and has to do with interest in land or anything that affects land, our scale of fees is between 10% to 20% of the value of the land. And I mentioned there, if we say land in law, the construction of the law, the word land in law, the construction is to the extent that your land is that BBOC assassin don't know forms or feature as land.
Okay, but I think you see BBOC so I need that's you
charge. It is the bare land or the vacant land. So what is the price of the land? Assuming this land costs $100,000, the minimum by our scale of between 10 to 20 is to charge 10%. But I can assure you, sometimes we put a human face to it.
So lawyer, so say you have assassin your $50,000 or 10%, more charge from 10 to 20%. Why it's not fixed?
So the lawyer has the laxity to choose between 10 to the maximum threshold of 20 to fix his fees. It's lawyer be able to make measure 10% of the value of the land. Obisu Bakado measure 15, Obisu Bakado measure 20 on your overcharge. It is not a subject of what's it called misconduct, because so charge you some no brodra. A bottom is an acronym paying for him, General Legal Counsel. Or charge my oba if form crass and 10% now. There are exceptions.
Moshe video ni ma ye di komo ye pa, and this is one of the important thing I say ye nia ye bisa ye finding out consultation. I think say was say wutimi nya lawyer bi na bibi wo ho a wudi tu nanim na bisa ne nia maybe ansa na do ho krampo akwa because sometimes o do come akwa na fidi wenu ho kra say o do konkoshem. So ye ne lawyer mensa e di nkombo na your reception no atiko, but ye din komo no more than 1 hour. Hello lawyer, minim say ye beto ankomo we so this wo hwe me na wa share video na mame na wa download tap send wo di me promo code NDA1 wo di ahwem na di send this card mo busuafo a wo wiase afa na nya Sunny Gold ye wo cocoa powder ye wo gari ye wo Tom Brown ye wo ekwegbe me ye wo shito ye wo niama bebre eni ti hwehwe Sunny Gold wo America the African market bi abeko bia ubisa Sunny Gold a ebi wo ho ebi ni wa bombode na to sa frame ana frɛ ye wo wholesale number na ye mbre ho bi wo hwɛ me ana wa share video no e de amam ye frɛ me Nana Donkwata me dase.